Pain and suffering are always inevitable for a large intelligence and a deep heart. Today, a friend of mine will explain it to you.
All right, let's just dive right into the ultimate modern paradox. Why, when we literally have every tool at our fingertips to build a happy, comfortable life, do we so often make choices that just absolutely ruin our own happiness? You know exactly what I mean. We know we shouldn't text that toxic ex. We know we shouldn't be up until 3 a.m. doom scrolling when we have a huge meeting the next day. And yet, we do it anyway.
And whenever we pull these stunts, we inevitably look in the mirror and ask, okay, am I just broken? Because in today's world, we are constantly bombarded with superficial therapy buzzwords, productivity hacks, and clinical checklists that basically treat us like we're malfunctioning machines. We're sold this idea that if we just optimize our morning routine, track our habits on an app, and apply the perfect algorithm, we can fix the glitches in our programming. But what if that creeping anxiety of feeling broken isn't actually a glitch at all? What if it's literally the core of who we are?
To answer that, we're not going to consult some modern life coach. No, we're turning to Fyodor Dostoevsky. And please, do not think of him as just some dusty 19th century Russian novelist you were forced to read in high school. Think of him more like a rogue genius, the original psychoanalyst who totally predicted the psychological contradictions of us modern humans. He delivers a radical counterdiagnosis to our obsession with optimization. Human beings are inherently chaotic, we are self-sabotaging, and we are deeply, inexplicably drawn to the dark.
See, back in the 1860s, Dostoevsky was fighting against this movement called rational egoism. Thinkers at the time argued that humans are essentially rational utility maximizers. Basically, show a person their true, scientific best interest and they'll naturally do it. Fast forward to today and we have the exact same equivalent: toxic hustle culture and optimization therapy. Both share this incredibly flawed clinical assumption that humans are just calculators of advantage.
And that dusty academic assumption of utility maximization is exactly the problem. The popular belief was that with enough science, enough technology, no one would ever knowingly act against their own interests. We're all just utility maximizers by nature, right? Well, Dostoevsky thought this was insanely naive. He essentially swiped this boring academic theory right off the table to reveal a much more radical and frankly uncomfortable truth about human nature.
Because, let's be real, here's what actually happens when pure rationality meets reality. If those rational egoists were right, nobody would ever smoke cigarettes, right? We have the clear scientific evidence of the harm it causes. Nobody would ever intentionally pick fights with people they love. But pure logic literally bursts into flames when you apply it to real everyday behavior. People willingly act in ways that completely contradict their own advantage all the time. Humans just completely defy pure data.
Which brings us to this brilliant, mind-bending realization in his work, Notes from Underground. Dostoevsky writes that man can deliberately desire something that is stupid, foolish, or even harmful, simply to have the right to desire for himself and not be bound to desire what is sensible. I mean, wow, we actively crave the absurd. Because think about it, if we only ever did what was mathematically optimal, we wouldn't be human, we'd just be programmable piano keys. We literally choose the stupid things sometimes just to prove to ourselves that we are free to make a choice.
And this introduces the absolute central concept of our whole explainer here: self-will. Think of it as this exploding light bulb of pure defiance. Self-will is basically an arbitrary freedom of action. It's that gut urge to desire against your own best interest purely to prove your independence in your individuality. Dostoevsky says we refuse to be treated like little ants in an anthill, working harmoniously towards some perfectly engineered society. Honestly, we'd rather smash the anthill entirely just to prove we have hands.
To avoid being just another predictable algorithm, we have this undeniable built-in urge to rebel. We stubbornly thrust ourselves along difficult, dark, and chaotic paths. We take risks. We roll the dice. We demand independence. And yeah, we invite chaos. Dostoevsky even noted that if you put us in a perfect utopia, where all our material needs were completely met, kind of like the modern welfare states of today, we would literally contrive a way to invent suffering and create chaos just out of sheer boredom.
And it all boils down to one single overarching reason: free will. The absolute most advantageous advantage a human being has is their own independent free desire, no matter what that independence costs or where it leads them. We act foolishly to preserve the thing that is most precious to us: our personality and our individuality. We have to prove we're the masters of ourselves, not just slaves to some logical system.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because self-will is actually deeply ambiguous. It has a dual nature. In its lowest form, it's just selfish caprice. It's totally self-destructive. Like Dostoevsky's character Stavrogin, who chooses the absolute worst romantic partner available just to exercise this bizarre rebellious whim. But there is also a higher self-will. This is where throwing away rational self-interest actually turns into a heroic act of self-sacrifice and serving others. Sharing everything you have and serving everyone around you, that is also a massive, totally illogical, and deeply beautiful manifestation of self-will.
Okay, but before we get to that higher salvation, we got to understand the necessity of the dark. Dostoevsky posits a truly terrifying idea. Suffering is doubt, negation. Perhaps prosperity isn't the only thing that pleases mankind. Perhaps mankind is actually passionately attracted to suffering, because in Dostoevsky's view, suffering is the sole cause of consciousness. Think about that. A perfect utopia with zero suffering would basically mean the end of human consciousness as we know it.
Which perfectly brings us to his profound short story, The Dream of a Ridiculous Man. The protagonist, who's contemplating suicide, falls asleep and dreams he's taken to this perfect, idyllic, Greek island utopia where people live in total, innocent harmony with the universe. Sounds great, right? But how does it fall apart? Well, it starts with a single lie. Just one. And that lie breeds sensuality. Sensuality gives birth to jealousy, cruelty, and pride. Soon they start saying mine and yours, losing that human unity entirely.
And the final nail in the coffin of their little paradise is this incredibly chilling declaration. The corrupted people decide, knowledge is higher than feeling, the consciousness of life is higher than life, science will give us wisdom, and the knowledge of the laws of happiness is higher than happiness. That is a terrifying realization. When we prioritize cold hard science, logic, and systems over the actual, messy, deeply felt experience of living, we completely destroy our human unity.
But how far can this dark, lower self-will actually go? Well, consider the horrifying extreme of the character Kirillov in the novel Devils. He outright declares, "I am killing myself to prove my independence and my new terrible freedom." People kill themselves for a cause all the time, tragically, but Kirillov decides to commit suicide for absolutely no cause at all. Just out of pure self-will, he wants to prove his ultimate sovereignty over the basic biological instinct of survival. It is the absolute darkest extreme of trying to prove you are not a machine.
Dostoevsky essentially visualizes this chaotic inner battle as a boxing match going on inside all of us. In his absolute masterpiece, Crime and Punishment, the protagonist Raskolnikov has this deeply divided psyche, completely caught between two halves of his soul. In one corner, you have Sonia, representing his capacity for genuine goodness, shared pain, and redemption, and in the other corner is Svidrigailov, representing pure evil, apathy, and this wildly narcissistic belief that the rules simply don't apply to him.
And when that dark half wins, we get what's called the Napoleon delusion. Raskolnikov's rational egoism convinces him that he is this great man, a modern-day Napoleon, who can commit a horrific double murder without an ounce of remorse, simply because he believes his grand future destiny justifies it. He actually tries to escape his guilt through rational calculations, which just brilliantly proves the extreme, violent danger of stripping away our humanity in favor of purely logical advantage.
So, if logic leads to murder and freedom leads to chaos and self-sabotage, how on earth do we survive our own minds? Well, the philosopher Giacomo Leopardi proposed a brilliant survival tactic called the social chain. The concept is surprisingly simple. Nature and the universe are cruel, meaningless forces. We are all essentially trapped in the exact same boat against this cruel mistress. Therefore, instead of turning on each other and playing by her cruel laws, we absolutely must unite our forces.
And this aligns perfectly with Dostoevsky's ultimate resolution, because the answer to the chaos of self-will isn't a spreadsheet, it's not a new planner, it's true compassion. In The Dream of a Ridiculous Man, the nihilistic protagonist is pulled back from the brink of suicide by a little girl begging for his help. He realizes that choosing to feel the shared pain of another person is literally the only way to discover true human belonging. Loving others as yourself isn't just some nice fluffy platitude. It is an active, fiercely defiant weapon against the indifference of the universe.
And this 19th century revelation echoes so deeply into modern introspection. The brilliant scientist Carl Sagan later noted, "For small creatures such as we, the vastness of the universe is only bearable through love." When you truly realize that the world is a dark void and that our own minds are incredibly chaotic, love and self-sacrifice, that higher form of self-will we talked about, become our only true salvation. We even see this exact philosophical resolution pop up in modern pop culture. If you've seen the show True Detective, you might remember the protagonist staring up at the night sky and noting, well, once there was only dark. You ask me, the light's winning. Taking a position of compassion in a world that is fundamentally cruel and terrifying, that isn't a sign of weakness. It is a profoundly heroic act. It's the ultimate rebellion against the tragedy of life.
So I want to leave you with one final question. You have this incredible, terrible, beautiful freedom. You are not a programmable piano key. And I promise you, no clinical checklist is going to fix the chaotic human heart inside you. You possess the ultimate self-will. So, knowing that you have the power to completely ruin your own life just to prove you are free, will you choose to use that freedom for chaos, or will you use it for the heroic act of compassion today? The choice is entirely yours.